oh, Jesus was single and the Apostle Paul was single, and those are two pretty big players in the Bible. And so that kind of put me on a journey of learning to really see what the Bible has to say about singleness, and then trying to be a voice in the church for people who are single, whether they want to get married or not, trying to help single people realize, hey, you have a seat at the table and you don't have to be married to begin your ministry and all of that.
Welcome to the Kenkel, Fritz and Friends podcast. We have Ryan Wekenman with us this morning. He's a storyteller, a pastor. He hosts a podcast called Single Today, and that's what we're talking about. The name of his new book, Single Today: Conquer Yesterday's Regrets, Ditch Tomorrow's Worries, and Thrive right where you are. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you all so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Well, we have too. You say you don't have to be married. You can be single. It's funny. I don't know why we're surprised by that thought. There is a very famous guy in the Bible that remained single. Yeah. Well, tell us about yourself and where this all came about.
Yeah, that, to your point, that is where this all came about. I have been a single pastor for the last 10 years. And for the front end of those 10 years, always felt like there was something wrong with me. A relationship has never been a huge desire for me, but especially in the stream of Christianity that I'm in, there's not really any single pastors. And so everybody just assumes that you're either married or about to be married. And so feeling like I don't want to pursue that path left me to wonder if there was something wrong with me, until, to your point, I started reading the Bible again and realizing, oh, Jesus was single and the Apostle Paul was single, and those are two pretty big players in the Bible. And so that kind of put me on a journey of learning to really see what the Bible has to say about singleness, and then trying to be a voice in the church for people who are single, whether they want to get married or not, trying to help single people realize, hey, you have a seat at the table and you don't have to be married to begin your ministry and all of that. So that's what I've been working on.
Well, tell us the story. You talk about sitting in a parking lot, frozen by emotion is what you said at the end of a great Sunday service. Take us back to that. What happened?
It was a Sunday night. Church parking lot was empty, locked up. All I had to do was get home, and I couldn't put my car into drive. I was so numb and overwhelmed, and trying to process trying to process my emotions and unable to feel just about anything. It's like I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't, and I wanted to cry, but I hadn't in years, and I couldn't even name what I was feeling. And that moment is where I was feeling like there must be something wrong with me right now. Not even right now, like in general. I must have missed something. God must have made a mistake when he made me, all of those thoughts. And that was really the catalyst that put this whole book into motion, because from there, I actually went to see a counselor, a spiritual director, and started doing this weekly work of learning how to actually name the emotions that I'm feeling, and allow myself to feel those emotions and give myself some space, and even let God into those places. Things as simple as like, I feel lonely right now, or I feel sad right now. I wasn't like doing that, did not come naturally to me at all. And what's happened is, over the last several years, it's put me on this amazing journey of really doing a lot of the inner work to realize, no, this is how God made me, and this is who I am, and I'm going to step into it with confidence and boldness. That can be really hard for anybody. It's especially hard when you're single. And so now I'm just passionate about helping other single people step into that space.
What's the difference between the Ryan back then and the Ryan today?
That's a phenomenal question. I think I feel less like I have to audition for a role. like I have to get the part, and more like I can just bring who I am, like my authentic self, to the table. I got into ministry young and got all these amazing opportunities at a really young age, which I'm super thankful for. I think I also felt like I had to put on like a pastoral face, or like costume, cape, whatever metaphor you want to use. And these days, that's just long gone. That's just so silly to me. And so I'm more interested in just bringing my full self to the table.
I think what's so unique about you and what you've done with Single Today, your book, is most books are about relationships and dating and how to cultivate those relationships. So you truly took on singleness as your single focus. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know what to do with that. Sally, so thank you for that. You're the first person to ask that question,
Oh,
because what happens is, like, I remember the first time I sat down to write a sermon on singleness, and I started reaching out to friends like, hey, what should I say? What would you want me to say about singleness? And it was all advice about like how to meet people. I'm like,
yeah.
no, you want me to preach a sermon about dating. I want to preach a sermon about singleness. And so it's a bit of a unique book in that regard, that it's not a dating book. It's a book about how to be content where you are. And what's beautiful about that is a skill set that every single human needs, whether you are single, dating, engaged, or married. And so let me just say right off from the jump, I'm a huge proponent of marriage. I believe in the second page of the Bible, God says it's not good for man to be alone. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. The two shall become one. I officiate weddings all the time. I push people toward getting married. I'm all for it. I'm also all for celebrating singleness and letting single people know that you aren't in a season of waiting or a pre-season. Like, you don't have to be married to step into everything that God has for you today.
That's amazing. And sadly, it's really unique because our focuses always seem to be on connecting people and, why aren't you and how should you and how can we help you? And yet you are finding this contentment, like we all should, right where God has us, and bloom and blossom there. So
Wow.
I really love that this is very, very personal for you and yet so relatable to all of us, married or single.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I noticed along the way how much we obsess over the next step. And
Yes,
it's not
there you
it's not
go.
just
There you go.
right.
Yeah.
Like, you're single, people want you to meet someone. You meet someone, people want you to get engaged. You get engaged, you get like 2 hours of celebrating before people go, so when's the wedding? Right?
Yes.
The wedding comes, and then you get like the honeymoon before people are like, so kids, you having kids, and then you have one kid and they want two. It's like we're obsessed with the next step. Meanwhile, Jesus said things like, don't worry about tomorrow.
Wow.
Be present here today.
I didn't think about that. There's the parental pressure from your parents probably too, right?
We've it's been so fun. My parents are amazing. And yes, there has been that, but we've also had the really deep heart to hearts. They were the first people to read the book, and we've gotten to do a lot of that deep work together. So now we're at a really good place where we can laugh about it, we can make jokes about it, but also we hear each other. We know where each other are coming from.
Now, you said you talk about that there are two enemies to singleness. What are they?
Yeah, so this is after probably 1,000 pastoral meetings with other single people. Just hearing all of the struggles that come with it. I realized one day they actually fit nice and neat into two categories. The first is yesterday. It's the past. So it's shame from the past. It's regret from the past. It's holding on to resentment and bitterness from like past relationships. All of that stuff keeps us from being present where we are today. Because I don't know if you're like me, you'll be walking down the street and everything will be fine, and then a memory will pop into your head, and you'll be like, "Why did I say that?" Or "Why did I send that text?" or "Why did I let that one get away?" or whatever it is. So the first enemy is yesterday, the past, and then the second enemy is the future. It's tomorrow. I call it the tomorrow trap in the book. It's our propensity to not be able to be present today because we're worried about, well, what does this mean for Christmas time? Like, am I still going to be single at Christmas? Am I still going to have to like come home without a date this Christmas? What about next Valentine's? My friends are getting married next summer. Am I going to have a +1? It's all of this worry about stuff that's not even happening. And so I call them the two enemies of singleness. It's yesterday and tomorrow. And that's what's fun about that is the work in the book becomes being about letting go and healing from yesterday, but then also surrendering and loosening your grip on the future so that you can learn how to be single today.
I love that because you're never in the past, you're never in the future. All you have is what is happening right now, which is really for us to really think that way, because I think a lot of us are like, oh, what's coming up? What's this and that? Or there's the thought that the future is coming towards you or that you're going towards it. There's none of those things are accurate. You're just here.
Just here. Isn't it wild to really, when you really think about it? And the only way time you can really experience God is right here.
Exactly, right
moment.
now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like we know that logically, but it's so hard to actually live like
it
that is true, man.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talk about a lot is that doesn't mean you don't learn from the past. Like I'm not telling people to completely throw it out. If you don't learn from the past, then you're doomed to repeat the past. But there's a difference between learning from and ruminating on.
Oh, that's a good point.
And in the same way, it doesn't mean you don't think about the future. That's just called planning. Like you have to plan. But at what point does planning for become worrying about? And that's the place that I'm trying to help people go, hey, the learning is helpful. The ruminating is not. The planning is helpful. The worrying is not. And so
that's good because right now you're single. You're not married. You don't know if you will be in the future, but this is where you are right now. I love that. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't miss it.
Yeah,
I think if I kick myself, it's those, wow, how did I miss it? So I just love that whole idea. Your book had so many humorous moments in it that I related to that I just have to take you back a little bit to yesterday. He knows what I'm going to say. To the so common and so awkward 8th grade school dance. Oh, so my goodness. Does that reveal your personality, where you went with that? I was just living through it and laughing through it the whole way.
I love that. So it's a story about the first time I danced with a girl and everything was going fine. And the song was Amazed by Lone Star. And the chorus is, I want to spend the rest of my life with you by my side. And my little 13-year-old brain just lost it. I remember thinking like, no. That's not what I signed up for. I don't want to do that.
Just wanted one dance.
In the book, I talk about this like spiral that's happening as I'm probably like stepping on her feet at this point, just losing my mind. And it's so humorous because like, she didn't think that's what we were signing up for. Of course not. Like everybody understood what was happening. It's just a slow dance song. But yeah, from an early age, it reveals a lot about who I am. Reveals a lot about how I'm wired. And it wasn't until I was able that memory just sort of haunted me for years. And it wasn't until I spoke it out loud to some trusted friends and we just like we just did now, we just laughed about it and they helped me see how absurd it is that it was like this thing that held me hostage for years just lost all of its power over me. And that's why I'm such a big fan of having healthy, safe space to process stuff from the past. Because when you just shine a light in the dark places, the darkness goes away.
Yes. But just the fact that you could take those lyrics from that song Amazed forever and ever and lose your mind. I was just like, oh
that's so good.
Goodness.
Oh,
But
it's so good.
But
I
then
look
I
back
have to
on
say,
that.
Kinkle Fritz and I, before we got together here with you, we both had memories of eighth grade dance that were just horrifying to this day. So thanks a
It's
lot
a
for that.
it's a hard season of life. You're trying to
Yeah.
figure out everything at
Yeah.
that point.
It's
So,
like in the eighth grade, this girl asked me out. She asked me out.
ow.
Are
And
you going to tell
we're
the story, Kinkle Fritz?
Oh, I'm
my
gonna
God.
real quick. Yeah. So we're at this we're on the bleachers at the junior high, and we're sitting there talking to each other, and then she proceeds to kiss me and stuck her tongue inside my mouth.
No.
And I was like, "What's happening here? Oh my gosh!
What is going
I'm
on?
gonna run!"
Forever and ever, amen.
I kind of knew that happened, but I
Yeah.
was like, "What?"
Yeah. I feel like we skipped some steps here. What is going on?
Yeah. Whoa, let's back up the bus.
Oh my gosh. I haven't laughed that hard in a long time.
It's so good. Yeah, I honestly, like, singleness can be such a sensitive subject for a lot of people. I really hope the book makes people laugh. I hope it brings some levity to it. Because at the end of the day, laughter is such an key component to all things relationships. Whether you are single, dating, engaged, or married, learning how to laugh about these things is a very healing process.
You know, speaking of healing and humor, that story led you to tell the story of the ones that got away. Yeah. How you and your friends kind of processed some of those funny, embarrassing, life-changing moments.
Yeah, so we were traveling for a year, doing a bunch of mission work all around the world, and it was so fun, but like we didn't have cell phones. We were completely unplugged, and there was a lot, when you travel, you remember all the highlights, but there's a lot of waiting in between for buses and for transport and for planes and layovers and all of that. And so we had to figure out a way to entertain ourselves. And the game that we created we called it The Ones That Got Away. And it was a very simple game. We all wrote down a list of all of the women from our past who maybe it was like an ex-girlfriend, like a serious one like that, or as simple as like wanted to shoot your shot but didn't for whatever reason, and then the time passed, or it was anything that had anything to do with any sort of relationship in the past. You're sitting on the bleachers in eighth grade and some girl kisses you out of nowhere, for example. We just wrote all those names down, and then what we would do is anytime we had spare time, the next person up would tell the story of the next person on their list. And it honestly, that picture of the iceberg in eighth grade where it's like the top 10% is out of the water, but then 90% of it is beneath the water. It's like all of those stories were all beneath the water for us, and we were pulling them up above the water. And the amount of healing we found from just doing that simple game was wild. In fact, the other three guys who were with me all ended up getting engaged within like a year or two of being back from the trip, because I think they just had to work through some of that stuff and identify some of those patterns, and then they were ready to go be great husbands,
Yeah.
And for me, it was a lot of realizing like, oh, I feel a lot more content when I'm by myself. And starting to sit into that space. So I can't recommend that game enough, with the right people in a safe space.
In a safe space is the key there.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're talking with Ryan Wekenman this morning. Single Today is his book. And you said the idea for this book came from the HOA. When don't we love our HOAs?
Oh.
Shout out to the HOAs.
Yeah. That sent a note about the pool closing. What do you mean by that? What happened there?
So the email was one line: the pool will be closed until further notice, which is great because that's like the main amenity that we're paying for. And we still had to pay our monthly fees, even though we couldn't use the pool. But I run past the pool every morning on my morning run, almost every morning. And I remember when we got that email, looking at the pool, thinking, water is water. It's fine. I could just jump the fence and go swim. But about a week into it, I ran past it and noticed that there was a bit of a green tint
Oh.
in the pool. And then about a month later, it had turned into this like swamp. It was disgusting. And what I realized is we used to have a couple that came through in their F-150 to add chemicals and stir the water and keep it looking and smelling fresh. They stopped showing up. And once they stopped stirring the water, it didn't take long for it to turn into a swamp. And so that is the illustration that is really like the central metaphor of the book, because I see that as a picture of our soul. When the water is stirring and it's healthy and it's thriving, then it's amazing. But when you just let it stay stagnant for too long, that stagnant water will start to stink. And what I realized is marriage, I think, is one of God's great designs for keeping the water stirring in your soul. You have somebody else in your life asking you about your day, helping you process your day, dreaming together. Even when it's not comfortable and you don't want to talk, you have somebody else stirring the water, and you're doing the same for them, at least in a healthy marriage. When you're single, you don't have that just necessarily worked into your system. And that means if you're not careful, that water can grow very stagnant. And every day can start to become like a less exciting rerun of the day before. At least this was my story that led me to sitting stuck in a church parking lot on a Sunday night. And so a lot of the book is answering the question, hey, yes, marriage is a great tool to help stir up that stagnant water in your soul. Great for all of them. What about us? What about single people who don't have a partner? How can we learn to stir the water? And the truth is, it's possible. You just have to be very intentional about it. And so a lot of the book is helping to help that process happen.
It's interesting to hear you talk about being locked up and kind of frozen in your emotions. And you tell the story of your friend who said, "Oh, well, I just keep this little card in my pocket." And I thought, that is a brilliant idea, because emotions are universal. We all feel them. No matter what emotion you choose, we can all relate to it. But yet to bring it up in the moment is not as easy. So tell us about that story and that practical step of listing emotions.
It's the simplest advice ever that has completely changed everything for me.
Oh,
Wow.
That's profound. Wow. Okay.
And it's funny how often those two things go hand in hand, right? And so it's my buddy Keith. We're cut from the same cloth. We're wired very much the same way. Except he had done, at the time we were talking, he had already done a lot of this inner work, and he showed me. He was like, "Yeah, I just have a list of emotions, and I take it out of my pocket, and when I don't know how I'm feeling, I work my way through the emotions one at a time. Okay, do I feel excited right now? Do I feel nervous right now? Do I feel worried right? Yeah, worried. That's how I feel." And then he'll just say it out loud. "I feel worried." And I'm sitting there listening to him, and I literally say, I go, "Wait, you can do that?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, you can do that." And I made a joke in the book about how I was like, "You got to send me that list," like as if there's not 1,000 of them online if you just Google it. In fact, today we're making Single Today bookmarks that have all of the emotions on the back. And
Cool.
I'm going to start passing those out to everybody who gets the book, because it is, again, so simple. But if you, like me, who I've always been very comfortable with all the spiritual stuff, I can hang in most intellectual circles, but the emotional, the EQ has always been something that I've had to work harder on. If you're wired like that at all, I can't recommend this exercise enough. Just carry a cheat sheet with you in your pocket. And whenever you need it, pull it out and practice. Set an alarm 5 times a day and practice going, okay, how do I feel right now? And the more you do it, the easier it gets to check in with yourself as you go.
That's a thing that I think, I don't know if that's a guy thing, but I feel like I'm not in touch with my emotions, well, especially like my wife is. And in fact, if how are you doing today? I'm pretty even keeled every day, which is, I'll just say this. I would love to have a really good high, but I don't. Or I don't really have good lows either. It's just kind of like, nah.
Yeah.
And so my wife, she'll be like, how you doing? Oh, I don't know. She goes, well, are you angry? I said, no. She goes, well, notify your face. 'Cause apparently I look that way.
Your face
So I
hasn't gotten
need
the
that
memo
cheat
yet.
sheet. Yeah.
Pull out the
Hey,
cheat sheet.
I'll send you a bookmark.
Yes.
There you go.
I want one too. I love the story of your adventure on Half Dome. I love to hike. I love to be outside. There is something so clarifying for me about getting out and hurting a little, climbing a hill, and just experiencing the wind and the sun and just what God has created. Tell us about how that came about, because it was kind of, if I pick up on it, it was a little bit random that you found yourself out making this tremendous hike.
I was in between seasons, finishing up at a great church in California to then go plant a church in Austin, Texas. And to end that chapter, I took a solo trip to Yosemite, and was like, the memory is very great, but the more that I thought about it, realized there was a lot of hard moments in that trip of really having to end one chapter and begin the next, and let go of some stuff from the past, and let go of some dreams, and that can be a very difficult thing to do. And in the middle of all that, I climbed Half Dome, which is like it's a hard climb, but it's this beautiful mountain in Yosemite. And I get to the top, hoping and thinking that, hey, once I get to the top, then like God's gonna speak to me and everything's gonna be fine, and I'm gonna get like my next call for the next season of life. And I write in the book about how I got to the top, and it was super anticlimactic for me. Like I'm sitting up there just like, God, I'm ready. I got my journal out. I'm
Where's
ready.
the burning bush?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in the book, and this is a little out there, but it happened. I had this out of body experience where I felt like a drone, but like I was like 3 feet above me all of a sudden, and I could just look at, and it may have just been that I was tired and dehydrated and was only eating power bars all day. That's very possible. Maybe I was hallucinating, but I could see myself sitting on top of this beautiful mountain, unable to just enjoy what was right in front of me because I was so worried about like, God, give me my next step for that next mountain that I'm going to take. And I have a moment where I just start laughing, and I break down and realize like, what am I doing? This is so silly. I'm so obsessed with the next step that I can't even be present today. I can't even be present on this mountaintop. And it's funny how often we can't wait to get on that vacation, but then we get to that vacation and then we're just worried about the vacation ending,
Yeah.
or there's a new dream job that we want, and we can't wait to get there, but then we get there and we realize like, oh, it also has annoying paperwork and tough people to work with. And like, how often is it always like, well, once I get there. And I just feel like the call of Jesus is, no, Jesus going, no, I came here. And so I want to be with you right here and right now. And so my walk down the mountain took like 5 times longer because I was walking so slow. I wasn't just trying to like win some race and get to the top. I was watching the birds and watching the squirrels and listening to the water and the waterfall as it fell down, and really realizing that wonder is always right in front of us. You just have to learn how to be still long enough to experience it.
Wow.
I love that. You talk in the book, one of the lines that you repeat is, I don't care. I don't care. I think that means you care. That's Talk about that. What's that all about?
I love the story so much. I was about to speak at a youth group in Laguna Beach. I have a friend who's a youth pastor there. I was just there to be a guest speaker, and his mom, Sally, is like this saint. She's incredible. And I was talking to her in the lobby when all the kids pulled up. And as we're having this like deep conversation, a high schooler, this girl comes running up to us, interrupts the conversation, and she says, my boyfriend just broke up with me, but I don't care. And then she goes, he said he wants to see other people, but I don't care. And then she walked away. and Sally, just without skipping a beat, goes, I don't care. I don't care. I think that means she cares.
Yep.
And and then, like walked after her to go talk to her. And I've held on to that line since. I don't care. I don't care. I think that means I care. In other words, it's usually if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't even know where to start with all this inner work, it's typically the place that you're pretending to not care about that you actually care about the most. And so those like pain points from the past, or that thing you're nervous about coming up, like, you have a big interview coming up this week and your friends ask you about it and you go, oh, it's easy. I don't care. It's going to be fine. I don't care. It's like, I think you actually do. And I think if you would just allow yourself to feel those nerves and feel that anxiety and talk about it in a trusted place, like, you might realize that you don't actually have to worry about this as much as you actually are. Same thing is true about the past, right? That person that hurt you, and now you're just pretending like, yeah, they broke up with me, but I don't care. I don't care. It's like, no, you do, because that was a real thing that happened and it hurt. And by the way, God cares about it too, because if it hurt you, then he wants to hear about it. And so take some time, and I like to do this with a journal. But if you're an external processor, take some time and do this with somebody else, or just in your prayer time, and say, God, that thing that happened back there, I think I actually do care about it. And I just want to voice this. Like, I don't like how that whole thing played out, and I don't think that's fair. And say this to God, I'm wondering where you were in that, and I'm kind of mad at you for that. Like, God can take it. He's fine. He's
Yep.
God. And when we learn how to have those honest times of facing the things we're pretending like we don't care about, we realize two things. The first is that we actually do care about them, and the second is that we can actually learn to heal from them.
Yeah, that's pretty important. Otherwise, you're just kind of moving along and missing an opportunity there. And sometimes you can get stuck if you don't work on that too.
I've gotten stuck more times than I know.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was talking to a good friend of mine last night, who's in the book. His name's Matt. And he told me, he was like, I just finished your book. I was so proud of you that so much of it is just the stuff you're in process. Like, it's not you going like, I've figured this out, now go
Right.
and do likewise. It's you just inviting us into the journey. And I thought, yeah, that's what I've been trying to do this whole time, is just we're all going to be imperfect people trying to figure this out together. And so let's talk about it. Let's laugh about it. Let's name it. Let's feel it. That's the kind of stuff that I'm really passionate about helping anybody, whether you're single, dating, engaged, or married, step into.
Yeah, that's good. That's just straight good therapy right there.
I just love that. It just as an interjection, it's just thinking the responsibility for me. Where is my role? She was Sally, I'm Sally. To say, hey, tell me more, and be open and available to the I don't care, I think you care, and stop for a moment and say, let's talk about that. Make yourself available to hear somebody else's story. Too often it's like, I'll pray for you. Bye.
Wow.
I feel really touched hearing you talk about that we need to make sure that we use those words. Tell me more. I want to hear your story. Let's talk about it. Anyway.
I love that, Sally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only ever thought about that story from my perspective. There, you just flip that, and your name happens to be Sally as well. You just flip that, and
Kind of worked.
Really, yeah. I think we all have a call to be Sally for people. And it takes, to your point, as simple as tell me more. That can go a long way for people.
It's a favorite phrase of mine, and I've found it to really open up a conversation where people are like, I don't want to talk about it. And I'll say, well, tell me more.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you on that. You told a story earlier about the pool at the HOA, and but you said that there is you're big about creating a system that does stir. Obviously, if you said if you're not married, they're kind of helping you. How do you do that when you don't have someone that's stirring it for you? Talk about that.
Yeah. I've found one of the most helpful systems is gratitude. So there's a story in the book about all of this was going on in 2020 when COVID was at its peak, and there was a guy who had moved in with me, a good friend. He was about to get married, needed a place to crash for a few months, and it was, you remember that summer, it was weird and it was tough and it was just strange. And we realized, hey, we need to set up a system for our mornings here to find to figure this out because the water's getting a little stagnant. And so what we would do is we would go work out in my garage, and then we'd go to my backyard, and we would just take a couple of minutes to take a few breaths, and then we would share with each other 3 things that we're grateful for about today. And sometimes it was really big, like powerful things. Other times it was, hey, I have a job, and or I have a roof over my head. Simple things like that. It's amazing how far a little bit of gratitude can go in grounding us in today. A lot of, I think the reason that water gets stagnant is because we stop saying thank you for what we do have, and we get so focused on what we don't have. And that's true, especially when you're single and you desire to be married. What if you took the next few days and started practicing being grateful for all of the advantages that your singleness brings you? And just what, I'm not saying those disadvantages aren't there. They are there, of course, and they are real. But learning to be grateful for what you do have goes so far in stirring the water. And so setting up a system that stirs is something I'm constantly trying to do in my life. And gratitude is just one of the really easy, practical examples that I do that with.
Gosh, I've never thought about gratitude and how it keeps you in the moment. That's wow.
I haven't thought of it.
pretty awesome.
I'm just taking that in right now.
Yeah, it makes sense because if you're thankful for what we have right now, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the future. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't be like, I'm grateful for that job I'm going to have in 10 years where my salary is doubled. You know? No, that's a dream. And
Dream
that's a
on.
goal, you know, and great, work towards that, but be grateful for where you are today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
And I think
I'm going to
that-
remember that.
Right, and gratitude is what brings joy too. I think that, because you're not, it takes you out of the doldrums of, oh gosh, or what if, and this and that, and it changes your perspective.
There's always something to be grateful for, and therefore, to your point, there's always something to find joy in. And to the listener who's going through a heavy season right now, that doesn't mean happiness. It means a deeper rooted joy that beneath your current circumstances, there are still things to be grateful for and find a joy that's unshakable in.
Amen.
One of the themes that I think we're all beginning to see is the overthinking problem. Very guilty. Yes. Ask my husband. Chapter 7, less grasping, more laughing, how to let go when you start overthinking. You start out with this whole thought on horror movies. So take us there.
Great. You guys are asking such good questions, by the way. Thank you for really diving into this thing. So
you're saying previously they've been really stinky. That's what
no, let's not get into the comparison trap here. Come on.
I'm a pastor. Hold your horses.
You asked for it, Gankle Fritz. Oh my gosh.
So the chapter begins talking about do you guys like scary movies? Like
No.
horror movies?
No.
I'll take them or leave them. My wife, we don't really watch them in my house because my wife has never seen one and she will never, ever seen one. Or see one. Yeah.
I love it.
So
I laugh a little bit about I don't like them. I have friends that do, and I just don't really get it. But it's always interesting to me thinking about when they yell cut on the set, are they just eating pizza and hanging out and laughing, with all the makeup still caked on their face and the chainsaw, because they're trying to create this thing that we're all afraid of, but we know what movie sets look like and they're not scary. And so I laugh about that. And then I talk about, it's a similar situation when you're watching it. Horror movies are scariest when you're watching it by yourself at night. And then all of a sudden, Uber Eats knocks on the door and you're somebody's coming to kill me, or one creaky pipe, you're like, this is it for me.
Yep.
But what happens when your spouse or your roommate gets home? All of a sudden they start asking you what you're watching and you start processing it out loud and being that's a plot hole there, and then you turn the lights on. or then somebody else comes home, and before you know it, you're just laughing about this thing that used to terrify you. And so I use that for singleness. That singleness is scariest when you're experiencing it in isolation. It's when you're home alone and the lights are off and you feel like there's something wrong with me and I'm going to be single the rest of my life and I'm a hopeless case. As soon as you start inviting some other people in on it, it's like turning the lights on. It loses all of its power. And you realize that you actually don't have nearly as much to be afraid of as you thought. And so that's where the chapter, that's kind of the jumping off point for that chapter.
Yeah, it's good.
You talk about the danger of living for the kingdom of me.
Ooh.
Unpack that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a phrase I made up. But how easy is it for us to put ourselves, to put me on the throne of our own hearts? And I think one of God's great designs is for marriage, because when you get married, you have to stop thinking about yourself so much because you have someone else you have to think about. When you have kids, when you have pets, like you can't really think about yourself anymore because you're constantly thinking about other people and how to serve them. And that's a beautiful thing. Gets you out of the kingdom of me. When you're single, you don't have that baked into your system. And so it can be very easy and very tempting to put yourself back on the throne of your own life. And before you know it, nobody does it like intentionally. Nobody wakes up with like a crown on their head, like, I will live for my kingdom today. But it just happens naturally. And before you know it, you find yourself living a selfish life instead of a selfless life. And so one of the things I'm trying to help people do in the book, and again, this is just coming from lots of trial and error on my end, is how do you go into social situations going, hey, I am going to go into this lunch or this hangout or this party learning or doing my best to be a blessing instead of being a burden right now. Because like, okay, when I go over, all of my friends are married and have young kids. It's just the stage of life we're all in. And so when I go over to someone's house for dinner, like they're chasing the kids around all day. They're cooking the food, they're doing the dishes. They're not thinking about themselves at all. I could, if I wanted to, technically just show up and think about myself the whole time. Or I can learn to flip that script and go, no, I may be single. I may not have kids I have to watch, but there are kids here. And I bet you my friends could use a little break. And so what if I spent the energy I have to go play with the kids or to do the dishes or to do all the cooking or to bring over, not show up empty handed, like all of these things that come very naturally, I think, to married folks. Us single people, we have to just be a little more intentional about learning how to not live for the kingdom of me, to get ourselves out of the center, to be a blessing instead of a burden.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah, I just say yes and amen. Hey, tell us quickly, our time is going by so quickly. Tell us about using the story of Mary of Bethany throughout your book. Why'd you choose her story?
So at the end, the book is in 3 parts, of course, yesterday, tomorrow, and then today. Yeah. And Mary of Bethany has 3 encounters with Jesus. And I picked her. There's no reference to a husband for her in scripture. So I know I'm speculating a bit, but it sure seems like she may have been single at the time. And I just realized that her 3 encounters with Jesus, the progression throughout the gospel, lines up really well with the book. So the first being the famous story of Mary and Martha, where her sister is doing all the serving and she is just sitting. And what's going on in that story, there's a lot of layers to it, but at some level, Jesus as a rabbi is inviting Mary to come and follow her. Like when Jesus says Mary has chosen what is better and it will not be taken away from her, he is saying Mary is sitting here listening to me and I am teaching her how to go and do likewise. And I would imagine that if you were Mary, and I would imagine, because this is what happened to me, is when that call came, you probably had a lot of things from your past that you figured just disqualified you from this beautiful call Jesus was calling you into. That's been my life, is I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not qualified to do that. And having to realize, no, there is no condemnation for your past. Jesus made sure of that. Now it's time to let go of that and be present today. So that's Act 1. And then Act 2, Mary's brother dies, Lazarus dies. and Jesus shows up. And for anyone that's ever lost anyone, one of the hardest parts about it is the fear of facing tomorrow without that person that you love. And what I've always loved about Jesus is he sits down and he cries, he weeps. And we know at the end of the story is he calls Lazarus back to life. But first he sits in that with Mary. And I love that for the people who get anxious about tomorrow, learning how to sit and grieve and know that Jesus is sitting in that with you. I think is a huge proponent and step towards learning how to surrender our fear of the future. And then finally, the last one is when Mary breaks the perfume and anoints Jesus in this very like exuberant way of, I think it was like a year's worth of wages for this oil. And even Judas is like, hey, we shouldn't be doing this, like this is too much. And what I love is that's the picture of how I want to live today, is just like overabundance of generosity for today in this present moment. And so it just felt like a fun way to bring Mary into the story, and really illustrate what I was trying to say in the book in a really practical way.
So profound. I absolutely never took in until this moment the fact that Jesus wept because even though he knew the future, he is experiencing today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So he allowed himself to feel
amazing.
all of it. Yeah, it is. Jesus is awesome.
Good. The last chapter, it talks about flipping the script on singleness. And what does that mean? What are you talking about there?
So I've just noticed that there is a script for single people. And
I have it right here. So.
The single script.
Honestly, there's two scripts. There's the script that the world has for us, which is like hookup culture and just like not taking life seriously at all. And I knew from a young age, like that's not going to work. That's putting a Band-Aid on this like massive wound in my soul. That's not it. But then there was a script in the church that was like, so get married, and you better hurry up and get married. And I just didn't feel like either of those scripts worked for me. And so then I start reading the Bible and I start going on all this journey, and I realized, hey, there's actually a different script that Jesus gives us and the Apostle Paul gives us. And I want to try to help single people flip the script that they've been given about their singleness, and step into the fullness of it. So for example, one of the scripts that I feel like we have is, hey, there's all these disadvantages to being single. And so how can you cope with the disadvantages? How can you survive until you get there? And I want to help single people flip that and go, I'm not just surviving until I get there. I'm too busy thriving right here. And yes, there are disadvantages, but there's also lots of advantages. So instead of coping with the disadvantages, I'm going to take advantage of the advantages. Super simple things like this is my home that I live in. I got to set this place up however I wanted, and I wanted to turn the spare room into a podcast studio, and I get to do that. My brother down the street, who has a wife and 3 kids, he doesn't get to just do that. He gets like his gym in his garage and his ice bath, and that's about it. Everything else is not his space. And so I could sit around going, I wish I had a family, or I could go, hey, but today, look at all these advantages that I do have. And I wonder if I could turn this into a podcast studio and then help some other people who are going through this singleness journey as well. You know what I mean? And so there's always lots of ways to flip the script and realize that there are lots of advantages, and let's major on taking advantage of the advantages.
Back to that word gratitude, right?
Yeah,
that keeps
you're
you
right.
in today. I love that.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's interesting. I was thinking about what you're talking about there, and I think a married person would be lying if they didn't say every once in a while, you're like, oh, wouldn't it be great just to do whatever I want?
I have never said that ever in all my married years. She's lying.
Really?
She's lying. She's not telling the truth.
Totally, right? That's a very human thing. And that's where I think this book is going to be also great for married people as well. I get a ton of feedback from married people, because the same thing is true for you. right? There are
Yep.
disadvantages to being married. We all understand that. But guess what? There are a ton of advantages to it too.
Yep.
It's such a like, okay, my brother who lives down the street who can't turn a spare bedroom into a podcast studio, that may be true. But guess what? If I asked him, he would say, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love the life that I have. And that's really the trick, is learning whatever season you're in, learning to just double down on where you're at and be all in for that season.
You know, I think there's some power in that. And here's where I'm going with this. I've been thinking about like how I met my wife, Becky. I had gone through a rough divorce, and it's interesting. I heard a pastor talk about, and it's funny, this actually goes back to the negativity in a way that you're talking about, because it was all about how do you find someone, this and that. And it wasn't necessarily embracing your singleness, but the part of it that did embrace your singleness, this part of this message, was that if you're not working on who you are and who you are as a person without anybody else, that has to be fixed first. Because I think a lot of people get married trying to fix a problem, but if the problem is you're still with you.
It's coming with.
Exactly. It's coming with you. And the funny thing is this, I really tried to take that to heart. And it wasn't until I really wasn't looking that I met my wife. Mm-hmm. And that has happened to me in a lot of scenarios. It has nothing to do with maybe being, single or not. I've noticed that when you are present in the moment and you are, I think you're more probably in God's will at that point than any other time, was you right in where you are in the moment. That's when things start to come to me, as opposed to scheming, thinking about, worrying about.
Wow.
I feel like God does his work there.
That's so well said. It reminds me of David in Psalm 37:4. He goes, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart.
Yes.
And it's like we spend so much time trying to chase after those desires in our hearts.
Yep.
And he goes, no, the starting point is just delight yourself in the Lord. Be present today. Be grateful for what God's given you today and the people in front of you now. And you may just find that there's a whole lot of overlap starting to happen between what God wants for you and what you want for you. And when that starts to happen, prayers just start being answered like crazy, So it all comes back to letting God work on you first. And so, yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking with Ryan Wekenman, and, whether you've never been in a relationship or are along again for the first time in years, that, it's a long list of worries that comes with it, but rather than a curse enduring that, it's singleness is a gift. So enjoy it. I love that. Yeah. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah, RyanWekenman.com is the website where I keep everything up to date. Also following me on Instagram is just Ryan Wekenman. And the book is now available, and that's the big thing that I'm pushing as a first-time author. Getting the book, leaving reviews on Amazon, on Goodreads, on all of that. But then I also have a Single Today podcast where I kind of take a different approach to a lot of the content and do some like more behind the scenes type stuff about it. And so those are the major ways.
If someone's in Austin, Texas, they want to go to your church.
My goodness, please. Red Rocks, Austin. We have 5 services, 2 on Saturday evening.
Wow.
3 on Sunday morning. RedRocksAustin.com, all the information and service times. The service times are always changing, so check in on that first, but we would love to have you.
Wow, you do 5 services?
It's a lot of preaching. I only have to preach every 3rd week.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
But by the time you get to the 5th one, you're like, did I make that joke already? It's a wild experience.
No wonder pastors take Monday off.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. Man, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Good stuff.
Thanks for having me. You guys are so fun, and you asked phenomenal questions.
Oh, thank you.